understanding biology. Bioliteracy is a thing. We need everyone to learn about the opportunities and what can be made with biology. And then they can use AI and everything else to help them get to the product, right? We talked about up top, what do consumers need? What do they want? What is going to make a difference for them? Hey, Karl, how's it going?
Erum, things are going great. We have just posted our 150th episode on the Grow Everything podcast, where we talk about biology as technology. And let me ask you, how does it feel 150 episodes in?
It feels like it happened in a blink of an eye. I don't even
It
know.
did.
I just felt like I was sleeping and I woke up in 150 episodes. Like, what? What just happened?
It's pretty crazy. We did a little bit of promotion on LinkedIn and on social channels, and we put together a graphic that shows all the people that have appeared on the podcast. And it was a pretty incredible group of people.
Yeah. It took a hot minute to make that graphic with all those people, but it was made. I know you did a lot of that. So thanks, Karl. And it was beautiful to see all those faces. It is a snapshot of the industry, which is growing. We've accomplished so much, not just you and I at the podcast, at Messaging Lab, but also the industry has accomplished so much. We also know that our listeners make decisions based on our podcast. We talked to our friends at GenSpace who run the Break into Biotech program, and they were like, 4 or 5 people came into the program because they heard your podcast. And I was like,
that's
what?
crazy.
I was floored. I was like, there's people listening? This is amazing.
But we know they listen because we go to these events and people will walk up to us and say, oh, I listen to the podcast. Or they'll hear us talking and they'll go, oh, don't you have a podcast? So somehow we're on people's radars, which feels really good.
Yeah. And not only do they join workforce development programs, which is what Break into Biotech is, but they register for conferences. They make business decisions based on insights from the show. They write reports, which we'll get into based on some of our insights. And our audience really values the depth, expertise, and actionable intelligence, and they engage accordingly. So shout out to our audience and special shout out to our LinkedIn network of more than 30,000 biotech and healthcare professionals across 70 plus countries. So hello, message from Messaging Lab and Grow Everything. Thank you so much for listening. 150 episodes. Wow.
Thank you for participating, for liking, subscribing, and just being a part of this community. We're on a growth trajectory and we're glad you're along for the ride.
Yes. And if other people want to join us for the ride, we are selecting sponsors to come and share what you're working on, engage our audience, and we are always looking to partner with people. So we have this wonderful community. If you're interested, keep listening to this episode. We're going to share some ways that you can sponsor the podcast. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. So you, Erum, had put some news in our notes for the week. Why don't we talk about the news and then we'll get into the episode?
Yeah. So this isn't quite news. If you're talking about news, is always like, oh, just breaking news. This happened 3 days ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. This actually happened in August, and I didn't see it until recently because our news media has been so saturated with other types of political news. And so this is actually an interesting partnership between the NSF and NVIDIA to enable AI open source models for U.S. scientific innovation. And it is the U.S. National Science Foundation, the NSF. They're putting about $75 million in, and NVIDIA is putting in $77 million to support the open multimodal AI infrastructure. It's called the OMAI. We'll put a link in the show notes. And it's led by the Allen Institute for AI, which is an incredible organization that's really looking at the ability to enable collaboration and create a fully open suite of advanced AI models. OpenAI isn't open, but what is and how do we use it to support the U.S. scientific community, especially in our purview of biotechnology? So we'll link to the show notes. If you do have a project or a company or organization that leverages AI for scientific research or applications, look into this. We really recommend that you look into this.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few episodes where we talk about the impact of AI on biotech and synthetic biology. There's a lot of work being done in that space. So this is interesting. We have had NVIDIA on. Vega Shah, who is at NVIDIA working with biotech companies, was on the podcast many episodes ago. it might be time to get other AI experts on the podcast to talk about the impact of AI on biotech and biotech research.
Yeah. I mean, I was also looking into what are some of the partnerships NVIDIA has with universities. And they're doing all sorts of things to predict seismic activity. There's work with NYU Tandon to create a digital twin of downtown Brooklyn to predict what could happen in climate events, or I don't know, like I guess mobility as well could be a part of that digital twin simulation. So a lot of this is about simulating as accurate to a degree as possible of what could happen in reality based on other impacts. There's just so much going on with NVIDIA. And, it's great. It's good to see how all these universities are taking some of their fundamental scientific knowledge and ramping it up with AI solutions. We'll be bringing it to you from the biotech perspective. Another thing, too, is leveraged resources. Everyone thinks, oh, there's no more resources because the government took away all this grant funding, which it did in some regard, but there is still funding available. We mentioned this NSF, the NVIDIA partnership with the Allen Institute. So that is an AI perspective for scientific research, but NIH funding is still there. I know there's a psychological reason why people think it isn't because of some grant funding being pulled, but keep your eyes peeled. Not everything went to zero. So see where the pockets of money are for your projects.
Awesome. So let's transition and talk about this week's episode, which is a little bit different for us, I would say. What we're going to talk about is a report on reports, or an episode on reports. And one of the things that we do at Grow Everything and also at Messaging Lab is pay close attention to reports that are coming out on the bioeconomy. And a lot of the information that is in those reports tends to be very important because people do make decisions, whether they're in business or whether they're writing policy. But it's based on reports that are being written by research organizations, by big consulting firms. In the past, we've had Richard Traherne of Capgemini come on to talk about engineering biology. They put out a great report beginning of the year that was very comprehensive. But we've also seen reports from Boston Consulting Group, from McKinsey, and each kind of paints a different picture of what is going on in the bioeconomy and how it is evolving.
Yes. Yep. And we have worked with BCG on creating a report, which we'll talk about more in this episode. Back in the day, the Nature Co-Design report, which we'll link in the show notes. And we have some other support we'll be doing on reporting on reports. So let's get to this report on reports.
Let's go.
Today, we're doing something different, a report on reports. There has been a wave of studies about the bioeconomy this past year, where the money's flowing, what's working, what's failing, and what we need to do next.
And the fact of the matter is we've read so many of these and we read them all the time with a goal. And what we're going to do is we're going to unpack what these reports say, what they miss, and what they mean for the future of biology and how that industry is an engine for the planet's economy.
So this idea of reports on reports came after someone pointed out that the U.S. government once won the Ig Nobel Prize. So if you guys know what the Ig Nobel Prize is, it's when there's something funny that's discovered but meaningful. And so they give a prize for any type of scientific achievement or science that has come out that's interesting. But so the U.S. government back in 2012 won the Ig Nobel Prize for producing a report about reports about reports. So yes, we're in prestigious company. And if a government can get an Ig Nobel Prize for meta reporting, we figured why not lean in and do one ourselves with better jokes and fewer footnotes.
So we're going to do like a meta-analysis on these reports, but why don't we first talk about the reports that we're going to go through. The first report we're going to look at is SynBioBeta's 2025 Investment Trends Report. That report showed that in 2024, investment in synthetic biology rebounded with fewer deals, but with bigger checks. The focus shifted to companies with proven products and clear paths to revenue.
And then we're also going to review the World Economic Forum's report with Capgemini about next generation bioinnovation. So this argues that biology won't scale through tech alone. Products must deliver clear value, so better performance, lower cost, or supply chain resilience to win mainstream adoption, which we love to talk about.
So the next report we're going to look at is one from the Advanced Biotech for Sustainability Coalition, which did a report with several large companies, including McKinsey, L'Oreal, and other companies. And the report found that projects that advance biotech could cut up to 4 gigatons of carbon dioxide and unlock a $1 trillion global market by 2040 if scaled properly.
Yeah, that's a good one. I can't wait to dig into that. And then we have Bio and Kearney's Bioeconomy Impact Modeling, which was released in March 2025. And the report finds that the U.S. bioeconomy already generates $210 billion directly and $830 billion, including ripple effects, and supports roughly 430,000 jobs for now.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that one. Then we looked at the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnologies report, which warns that the U.S. is falling behind China in biomanufacturing and biological data infrastructure, and it called for a $15 billion 5-year national initiative. We've had 2 guests on the podcast talk about the report, Alexander Titus and Angela Belcher.
Yes. And then last but not least, and the report that wins the title of Best Title is First Bite Ventures, The Biomanufacturing Graveyard. And that analyzes more than 60 failed companies and concludes that most died from economic and operational mistakes, not science. And I'm so glad that someone wrote a report on failure. So I'm excited to dig into that. So let's get started. Karl, do you want to talk about the first one and we can chat about it?
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about SynBioBeta's report. SynBioBeta puts out an investment report every year, and they look at what happened in the previous year. So the report they put out at the beginning of this year showed that funding for synthetic biology projects was up 14% year over year to $12.2 billion, with the average deal sizes nearly 60% larger. The big conclusion there was that investors favored industrial biotech, something we talk a lot about on this podcast. So chemicals, materials, and agriculture over speculative platforms. Again, something that we talk a lot about on this podcast, whether platforms or products or processes are going to win. And the examples that were named in the report included Solugen, who combines biocatalysis and electrochemistry as a model for high-value, low-volume manufacturing. Pivot Bio, a company that has scaled microbial nitrogen to thousands of farms. What Pivot has done is they basically spray microbes onto seeds so that you need less fertilizer to grow those seeds. And Archaea Bio, a company that is engineering cattle to cut methane emissions.
Yeah, and not to be confused with Archaea, the company that makes personal care and beauty ingredients. That was a spin out of Ginkgo, led by Jasmina Aganovich. But it makes sense, right, Karl? Being able to do biochemistry, you can create amazing chemicals, not only just through biomanufacturing, but of course, using cell-free biomanufacturing and being able to do that at a very cost-competitive way compared to everyday chemical manufacturing. It makes sense, right, for investors to put money towards these foundational molecules that are needed to be the ingredients of everyday products.
So basically what this report is saying, that the easy money's gone, but patient capital has finally showed up. And I think that this has played out during the course of this year where so much money has been moving into AI and AI infrastructure.
Yeah. Yep. And Solugen's latest partnerships with Dow and ADM show biology is moving from pilot plants to global supply chains. And then you mentioned Pivot Bio, and that's proof that climate solutions can also be profitable, right? So sustainability is table stakes. Now let's talk about high performance and profitability. So Karl, are we seeing biology mature, or is it just another hype cycle wearing a lab coat?
I don't know. I mean, here we are. It's October. This report came out early in the year. In a way, it feels like 2018 software, but the bigger economy feels more like the dot-com bubble with all this money being poured into AI. So the tourists are gone. The builders are staying. I mean, this is something we've seen over and over again. We saw it in software, and we've seen it in biotech. So that's where my head is at today.
That's great. Okay. So the next report that we want to dig into, and we had someone from Capgemini on. Richard Tahern came on a podcast. You spoke to him. I spoke to him a little bit until I had technical difficulties. But Capgemini worked with the World Economic Forum, and they wrote this paper about the next generation bioinnovation. So this report warns that biotech often leads with technology, not value, which is something, again, that we keep saying is that let's talk about the end state, right? Technology is great, but people aren't buying technology, they're buying value, they're buying a product. It also stated that successful products start with user needs. So what are the user needs? Taste, texture, cost, reliability. And then once you understand that, you can work backward and then align your technology with what functionality or need the consumer's searching for or looking for, or maybe they don't even know, and you're sharing some completely new experience with them that completely changes their lives, right? This is the whole, if people back in the day that when we were just riding in horse and buggies, if they were told what type of advancement they needed for mobility, they would say faster horses, but they wouldn't have known to actually have a car, right? Same story. And so the examples that were discussed in this report were Bolt Threads and Modern Meadow struggling to compete with cheaper alternatives despite strong science. And both of those companies were heavily invested in and tried different types of products targeted to different industries. And they struggled, right? They're both still around. They're finding their footing, hopefully. And then it also mentioned that consumer adoption is growing in beauty and food sectors that we know intimately. And that's because performance and the story align, and things like bio-derived collagen, peptides, plant-based colorants are really capturing the minds and what consumers actually need. What do you think about some of these points that were made in this report? And I know you had this conversation more than I did with Richard. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think it's worth even stepping back a little bit because Capgemini had put out this really comprehensive engineering biology report, which we cite regularly. It's a very well done, very well researched report that shows that so many people are looking for these biosolutions. But as we say on the podcast, people aren't really looking for sustainability. If it doesn't smell good, taste good, save you money, or have high performance, sustainability is becoming a very challenging sell. So this report is really important for highlighting the fact that these companies that had so much invested into them, companies that focused on materials, but then have pivoted into personal care and beauty, they're still having a hard time. Again, it goes back to that message of you can't sell sustainability.
Yeah. And we know the big CPGs are now piloting bioidentical ingredients where consumers can't tell the difference, right? It's just there's biotech vanillin and there's elastin peptides. People don't know the technology behind it. They just know, hey, it tastes like vanilla. Okay, these peptides are working. And that's it, right? They don't need to know the technology. They just need to know it works.
Yeah. So what's one bio-based product that actually outperforms its twin that maybe came from petrochemistry or fossil fuels?
Now, this is a good one. I'd say engineered peptides for hair care that deliver better results and consistency. That's what wins. I don't know if one exists. I mean, maybe we should create a company that has unique hair peptides. We could call it K19 hair. Okay, let's go on to the next report, Karl.
All right. So this is First Bite's biomanufacturing report. You pointed out that this report had a really great title. And we had Veronica Breckenridge from First Bite on the podcast a couple months ago. And this report showed that 80% of failures in biotech came from biofuels and platform chemicals. So low margin sectors that cost a lot of money to boot up. They have enormous capital costs. And problems included unrealistic cost models, scale up errors, and poor offtake planning. And the examples that are cited are Amyris, Solazyme, and Metabolics. So these are kind of like first generation synthetic biology companies. They were all very strong in research and development, but they were sunk by scale economics. And I think the lessons need to be told over and over again because we see the same mistakes being made. And then survivors like Genomatica, they pivoted to licensing and partnerships instead of building plants alone. This really mirrors today's reality. Investors are really looking for staged capacity, shared infrastructure, and tool manufacturing.
Yeah, biotech didn't run out of science, it ran out of cash flow. There's a lot of infrastructure that can be reused. You know, either creating a manufacturing company or you're creating a product company. To do both is extremely challenging. And we don't need to, right? Where do you want the money to come from, right? And being able to make that decision in a data forward way. Put your data hat on. Is it better to do this through B2B, or is it better to go direct to consumer? So if it's B2B, maybe it is manufacturing. If it's product, work with the manufacturing companies, which Genomatica did, and create the products that go directly to your customer. And it's an exciting model that I'm super curious about. We've talked about this internally. Easy is not the word to use.
Relatively
easy compared to back in the day when you did just think, oh, I need to raise $500 million to create a pilot plant. And it's like, okay, the math ain't mathin', but somehow the vision was what drove investors to put the money in. And then you start seeing those failures. But I do really appreciate the First Byte team coming together, taking a hard look at the failures, taking the lessons learned, because I do believe failures are the key to success, right? Like we had Glennis Mara on, formerly of Biolabs, now at Memorial Sloan Kettering, talk about, wouldn't it be great to have a database of failure? So we just don't do it. We don't repeat failure. And so I really, really applaud the First Byte team for writing this report. Thank you so much for it. Karl, I'm going to ask you, what's the smarter path to scale today?
I say start small, build your ecosystem or infrastructure, and then sell big. Prove the economics before you start pouring concrete, because you might not have to pour concrete. There's a lot of infrastructure you can leverage. And there's a lot of new infrastructure that's being created today that you can take advantage of, which can keep your cogs down.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, shall we dig into the next report?
Yes.
All right, so the next report is the Advanced Biotech for Sustainability report, so AB4S for short. And this report estimates that by 2040, advanced biotech could abate 3 to 4 gigatons of carbon dioxide, repurpose 2 to 4 million kilometers of land, and save 250 to 500 billion meters squared of water, and build $1 trillion market across fuels, food, and materials. So that's really looking at some very high value markets and going after some of those hard-hitting climate concerns, going after fossil fuels, going after things causing pollution. Let's just leave it at that. So biology could do for climate what the internet did for communications, but we have to plug it in, right? And in this report, some examples I want to mention are bio-based aviation fuels and compostable plastics are called out as the top 5 opportunity areas, which I was like, what? Okay, bio-based fuels making a comeback. Don't call it a comeback, but it is a comeback. Let's see. And then they also mentioned food fermentation and enzyme-based manufacturing among the fastest growing segments, which aligns with the SynBioBeta report, which talked about how a lot of investment went to companies that were making chemicals and materials in agriculture, Solugen being one of them that uses biocatalysis and electrochemistry. So we also look to where there are similarities amongst these reports, what trends we're seeing across them. And we love the fact that they're all pointing towards these advanced chemicals or using cell-free as a way to make new types of chemicals. It's great. You want to add some color to this report, Karl? What do you think?
I mean, have you noticed when you purchase an airline ticket that it does give you a CO2 friendly option? Because I've just recently noticed that. I don't know if that's something new, and I know that when we first looked at this report, you pointed out, oh, bio-based aviation fuels. Wow, where'd that come from? I mean, you just mentioned that too, because we know about the kind of biofuels disaster that really set up the synthetic biology industry. But I think what's interesting about this report is it makes the case that corporate climate rules, despite this kind of push for deregulation and less regulation, are still pushing buyers to seek out environmentally friendly materials. And bio-based materials or bio-based options are finally getting the attention they deserve because they actually do reduce carbon. But the question is, who gets paid to save the planet?
Yeah. And how much carbon emissions need to be removed, right? One of the things that we do a lot of raw biomanufacturing. But one thing we do make clear, we're not saying petrochemicals are horrible. You know what I mean? Like you do need some of them. It's just that the extreme dependency is a bit much. We need all of it to work. together. So we're fans of the petrochemistry, and it got us to where we are today. Let's not forget that a lot of our economic freedoms that we enjoy for more of the population came because we were able to have cheaper fuels, more products that are more affordable for people to have respectable lifestyles, right? It had its place, but we did a little too much. Now we got to reel it back. We got to readjust. We have to adjust. So that's where we are. And who gets paid for saving the planet? The ones who link impact to profit. If it cuts emissions and cost, it wins. So got to do both. We can have our cake and eat it too.
I just want to mention a couple things about this report that I really appreciated. So we talked about, one is that they are predicting an abatement of 3 to 4 gigatons of CO2 by 2040. We didn't really get into too much detail on that because it starts to get kind of murky, but it is important to note that that is one of the things that bio-based biotech solutions offer, this reduction in carbon emissions, even potentially pulling carbon out of the air. The reason we didn't go too deep into it, and Erum, you know this way better than I do, is because the numbers start to get very murky very fast. People are talking about scales that are 2030, 2040, different numbers. How many gigatons do we emit today? How many gigatons do we need to abate by 2040, by 2050? So we decided to not get into those details. The other thing that I appreciate about this report is it did talk about water, which I don't think gets talked about enough. Water is, one of the new golds. When they talk about these big data centers that are being built for AI, one of the issues they talk about is how much water they require. And then finally, they talk about building a $1 trillion market. I felt like that number was very conservative compared to other reports that we've read in the past. And the numbers of the bioeconomy vary, but I will just say that one of the things that I've heard repeatedly is that in the United States, until the bioeconomy reaches $1 trillion, and we're not there yet, no one's really going to pay attention to it. We're very close to that. So those are all things that I really appreciate about this AB4S report. And let's talk about the next one.
Yeah, let's talk about the next one. So you took a look at this one. We mentioned a little bit about, we had experts on this podcast talk about it. Go for it, Karl.
Okay, so the next report, the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechs report was Charting the Future of Biotechnology. And this one, we've had a couple of people come on the podcast to talk about how the U.S. is heavily dependent on foreign suppliers for DNA synthesis reagents and a lot of biomanufacturing equipment, which is surprising. It recommends a $15 billion 5-year national plan for infrastructure, workforce, and secure data networks. And it plays into this idea that if the last century was about computation and oil, this one's about AI and DNA. And we can't afford to lose our leadership in this industry.
Well, we're already losing the leadership. If you ever take a look at what's going on in China, there was all these articles that came out recently about China's force in not only drug development, which is insane in terms of how they're leveraging AI. China's always been super fast at manufacturing. Again, not only for the biopharma side, but also for the bioindustrial side, making all the different ingredients and materials that we talk about. And there was someone who wrote on LinkedIn who is, I think, Chinese American, who goes to China and participates in the conferences there and is just blown away and reports about what he's seeing at these biomanufacturing conferences. And they're packed full of people and different companies there. And so we do need to gain this leadership, hence why this report is written. And I recommend people going back and listening to the episode with Angela Belcher, which talks about workforce. Got to start younger. You got to start younger with people understanding biology. Bioliteracy is a thing. We need everyone to learn about the opportunities and what can be made with biology. And then they can use AI and everything else to help them get to the product, right? We talked about up top, what do consumers need? What do they want? What is going to make a difference for them? Anyone can understand that. But then what tools are they going to use? Are they going to use traditional chemistry or are they going to use biochemistry? It all works depending on what you're trying to make, right? And so, again, this report does highlight China's rapid investment in biomanufacturing zones. They are pouring money into it. Karl, you and I talked about their 5-year plan, and they triple underscore biology and AI as their beacons for development. And then there were a couple other examples.
Sure. I mean, we've seen that both the United Kingdom and the EU have launched these public-private biofoundry programs. And the US really needs to define what critical bioinfrastructure is. Is it just biomanufacturing infrastructure? What else is it?
And so they've defined some of that in this report. What is that infrastructure? Not only biomanufacturing, but bioprocessing, right? How do you process different natural resources, whether they are feedstocks to then feed the microbes that are making the molecules in fermentation, or just other types of resources, specific plants. Was it molecular manufacturing in plants, being able to have plants make certain molecules? And so we can help them define it. Next time they write a report, bring us in. Erum and Karl, Grow Everything Podcast, will help them out.
Why don't I ask the question? Erum, what do you think one policy move that can help the bioeconomy scale?
We're talking about the U.S. government procurement. Buy the bio-based materials. Don't just celebrate them. Don't just say, hey, good job, companies. You guys are doing things over there. You go do it. No, purchase it. Government buys so much products. I don't want to sound dire, but for the military, for jails and prisons, which that's a completely different conversation. And I'm all for reform when it comes to that. But government is a big buyer of products. Buy the materials from these companies.
All right, let's go into the next report. Erum, why don't you kick this one off?
Okay, this is the final report, one that kind of slipped through the cracks for me. But then I know when we were doing this, I was like, oh, wait, there's another report. And this report is from Bio and Kearney. So it used to be called A.T. Kearney. I had worked with them in the past. It's a consulting company. And they did this report and they looked at data from 2023 that the U.S. bioeconomy generated $210 billion in direct GDP and $830 billion, including indirect efforts, and supported around 430,000 jobs. So that was a great year for the bioeconomy, just in terms of growth and numbers. And most of this has been, again, in industrial biomanufacturing, agriculture, and materials. So the bioeconomy isn't the future. It's payroll today. It is actual economy, right? And we always say that we talk about the bioeconomy, but it's just the economy. It's not the bioeconomy. It's just the economy, right? And what did you want to highlight for our listeners from this report?
So this report was very practical, which is no surprise because Bio is the biotech industry organization, the big lobbying arm of the biotech industry. And so an example is something we talk a lot about on this podcast, this idea of using enzymes to replace harsh chemicals in detergents and food processing. That, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's huge when, for example, P&G's Tide started using an enzyme that allowed you to use cold water as opposed to hot. That was a huge plus for the environment because most of the energy used when you do your laundry is hot water. It also talked about bio-based packaging and textiles that are driving regional growth in the Midwest and in the South. So that I thought was also super positive. This report argues for better measurement because bio's contribution is still hidden inside of other sector statistics.
That's right. The hidden contribution of biology is something that we learned intimately. We worked with CPG companies, and they have been using biotech for many, many years, even from the beginning, whether they used waste products to make different like soaps, for example, or candles, and they used waste as a resource from the early days. And then they have been silently using biomanufacturing for unique ingredients, hair care products or skincare products or food. And it's just not being calculated in or recognized as much. So I love the fact that Kearney pointed this out because we always hear, biomanufacturing can't scale because it's going to cost too much money. Well, it has. And it will continue. And if the math doesn't work out, you need to go back to the drawing board and figure it out because there's one point in your math, there is a variable that you're not optimizing to be able to get the cost down correctly. And you need to figure that shit out.
Whoa. Yeah, what this report also reminds me is that there are different ways to measure the bioeconomy. And I'm pretty sure that in the United States, we don't count agriculture. We don't count our natural resources, so like all of the timberland. We don't count our fisheries. And other companies that have done bioeconomy blueprints, they include those. They value their timber, they value their fisheries, they value their agriculture. So again, this call for better measurement, I think, is a really good one. But I think it just makes things more confusing for people. How big is the bioeconomy? Well, you said it before. The bioeconomy is the economy. And if it's already this big, why don't people realize it?
It's because biology hides in plain sight, from your laundry to your snack bag. It's there. Just open your eyes and then see it as an example of progress.
Okay, so as we wrap up this podcast episode on reports, let's just talk about the bioeconomy, split personality, the contradictions that we saw in these reports, like the bigger theme. Like, this is our meta-analysis of these reports. What did you think?
Of course, for us and for a lot of people in this industry or this sector, there's big vision, but then compare that with the small margins, right? We're talking about chemicals that are cost less. How do you get it in? So everyone predicts this $1 trillion market, but most companies still fight for unit economics. So how do we square that circle? And I think that's something that we need to bring someone on to talk about a bit more, and how some of these companies' accomplishment. Like, we need to get Soligen on. It'd be great to talk to them to see how they continue to succeed. And another one is this push and pull from global trade, which is how our economy has been working for many decades, versus national security. And that is the talking point. That is what we're all looking at right now. We want open innovation, yet we worry about by supply chain dependence. So what does that look like? How do the people that are writing these reports, because this is really about how we're coming together to have a discourse, create intelligence across an industry, and share it. So what makes sense, right? Global trade, okay. There are certain items where it makes sense, and there's other items where you can just keep it local and regional, right? So I think, again, it's a very nuanced thing. What's a theme that you saw that was important?
I'm going to just expand on the global trade versus national security theme a little bit, because we talk a lot about distributed biomanufacturing as a solution, and especially with the way the political climate is today, there is this turn towards isolating the US, and there's these tariffs that have been implemented. And so that feels like that should create more opportunities for localized biomanufacturing and for producing more items here in North America, particularly in the United States. And that speaks directly to national security as well. I feel like we could do entire episodes on that. And like we said earlier, we did have both Titus and Angela Belcher to talk about the National Commission on Emerging Biotech, talk about that.
Okay, so we produce and purchase locally, or do you produce things locally and sell them internationally? What's the push and pull from global trade and national security when it comes to distributed manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. It seems like this administration wants us to produce everything locally and export. But the reality is that we're, I'll say, decades behind, and it's not really fair. Let's just say we're a decade behind where China is when it comes to manufacturing. It's really like probably in the 90s that China really started building their manufacturing infrastructure. And it really didn't take off until the early 2000s. Unfortunately, it made it very easy for us to get very dependent on cheap manufacturing. And many American companies enabled that because they were looking for cheaper places to manufacture. And that is one of the challenges with bringing manufacturing back to the US. The US is a very expensive market, costs a lot of money to employ people. I think China's getting more expensive. It's really helped Southeast Asia grow because there are still places that it's cheap to manufacture. And who knows what automation and robotization is going to do to manufacturing. But this idea of localizing, especially essential things, I think speaks to national security.
Then the question is, what is essential, right? Is it drugs? We had Christina Smolke of Antheia on, who makes active pharmaceutical ingredients using biomanufacturing, which could happen anywhere. And those are essential to some people. So yeah, the concept of essential, like what can we make this? I mean, food, of course. And then what kinds of food, right? And that also plays to like this final cross-report theme is this sustainability versus convenience. And this also goes, I mean, the reason why we buy so much from China is that it's cheap, it's easy, the supply chains are set up, and it's easy to buy something for $1 versus $5 if it's similar. The only difference is the brand. So consumers do want eco-friendly, but they won't pay extra for it. This is something that we talked about. Edward Shenderovich of Synonym talked about that on his episode, which is our #1 episode right now. That's the push and pull.
Yeah, and I mean, the tension between greener planet, more sustainable ingredients, and technology, that shows up in every single report. Scaling biology means solving economics. It's not just ethics. It's not just sustainability. You've got to solve the economics.
Yeah. So what's the most important story we're not telling about biology's role in the economy?
Well, it's not science fiction anymore. It's infrastructure and it's economics.
Yes. Yep. Excellent. All right. Hi. A quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business. So let's have some fun, Karl.
This was a very serious episode, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a report and reports. What do you expect? We'll loosen up right now, right? We're going to do something we do with a lot of our guests recently, and we have these quick fire questions. So you can ask the first one, but we'll both answer. We'll go from there. 5 questions. Here we go.
Okay, Erum, what's one buzzword from these reports that you wish would be banned forever?
Yeah, from these reports and many other reports and blogs and Silicon Valley, the word is disruptive. Biology doesn't disrupt, it decomposes.
I would ban platform because everything's a platform until it runs out of cash.
Okay. So if biology were a movie genre, what would it be? Sci-fi, documentary, or rom-com?
Yeah, I would normally say sci-fi, but it is a rom-com. The lab falls in love with the market, but they're from different worlds.
Totally. She's a scientist. He's a supply chain manager. It'll never work until it scales.
I don't get how they met because that just is such a weird combo. Okay, which come first? $1 trillion bioeconomy or 1 billion bio-based products in homes?
Billion bioproducts. People will have bio-based everything before they realize it.
Bioeconomy is already in your laundry. It's in your Doritos. It just hasn't gotten the credit yet.
Yep. Okay, next one is, if microbes could talk, what headline would they write about us?
Humans finally discover they've been doing microbes' work this whole time.
Or, Earth's smallest employees demand better PR. We got you, microbes. We got you. We'll give you the best PR. Call Messaging Lab.
So when people look back in 2050, what do you think they'll say this era of biology got right?
That we stopped treating biology as magic and we started treating it like infrastructure.
And we finally learned to collaborate with microbes instead of trying to outsmart them.
Yes. All right. Exactly. That's a little fun that we had. These reports prove the bioeconomy is already here. The next challenge isn't proving biology works. It's proving it pays.
And the people who figure it out are going to be the ones who grow everything from our food and materials to our future.
Awesome.
All righty, Rem, that was a lot of fun because we've read these reports and talking about them is a little different than just reading them and really thinking about what they mean. What was your take on us analyzing the reports, our meta-analysis of biotech and the bioeconomy?
My take was, you're welcome.
Listeners, you're welcome.
Yeah, listeners are welcome. You're welcome to ourselves, or thank you to ourselves for doing that. Now, I want to thank all the people that took the time to look at the bioeconomy critically, looking at all the inputs, looking at some of the challenges, the headwinds, the tailwinds, right? Looking at everything as much as possible. And, a lot of these reports are through not only these consulting groups that have a perspective, but they're bringing in experts, certain innovators. They're bringing in heads of different organizations that do have this large overview of the economy because they have such a big footprint across different markets. So it's great to be able to pull these insights because, again, we said at the top of the episode, we need to make decisions based on data. To the extent that this data is as correct or accurate as can be, one of the biggest jobs CEOs or executives have is to make plans. They have to get as much information as possible to create that plan and then make decisions as things change. So to be able to have this type of information, especially, again, another shout out to the Graveyard Report, I think being able to talk about failure, which people have done in other books and reports to be able to examine where things went wrong. But I think for our industry, to put it all in one report was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a fantastic report. And then the Advanced Biotech for Sustainability Coalition report, I thought was also really useful in terms of really discussing not just the economic benefits of advanced biotechnology, but also the environmental benefits, which is something we do talk about here on Grow Everything, but I think it's something that gets neglected when people talk about the impact of biotechnology and the bioeconomy just generally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always good to see the big overview. And then how do you fit into that landscape of economic growth, of technological innovation? Then you make decisions on, for especially in the world of biomanufacturing, what kind of feedstocks? What does bioprocessing look like? How do you extract value? We're big fans of the waste to value story. We've probably talked about a lot in this episode. Not even the story, but the actual function, waste to value. Waste is a man-made thing. There is no waste in nature. Everything's reused and recycled. So can we bring that thinking into our industrial processes and the way that we make products? So I think we had a good time. It was great to read these reports. It was great to be a little silly about them. I think just to shed some light, not only on the key takeaways, but make it a little bit more digestible, especially for people that aren't in the space and want to come in to the world of the bioeconomy. Again, we know a lot of listeners, the bioeconomy isn't their day-to-day, but they're curious and they want to learn. And hopefully something sparked their interest from today's episode that they can either come to a conference, learn more, join the Break into Biotech program, or do something cool. So hopefully everyone enjoyed this episode.
I will say there are new reports coming out all the time. And we try to keep our pulse on what those are. If there's a report that you found interesting that you think we should read or should mention, please let us know. I know that as we were recording last week, there was a new report that came out from the Hoover Institute by Drew Endy and a team of researchers from Stanford talking about biosecurity, which is something that's very real and something for people to consider. So that's something that we didn't cover in this podcast, but it could be something that we end up talking about going forward. So there is new reports coming out all the time, but we'd love to hear what you guys are reading and what has impacted your thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can get Drew Endy on the podcast. It's been too long, 150 episodes. Drew, come on.
Yeah, I know he was waiting for this report to be done, so now it's time for us to reach back out to him.
Perfect. And for those that are listening that want to collaborate with us on the podcast or sponsor, we talked about how you can join the Grow Everything movement. We like to think this is a movement. Let us know. This isn't just you coming and doing an ad on the podcast. It's really about being a partner and helping shape a conversation on the future of biology as technology. And so quick things that we would do, 30-second ads are very common. We would also like to talk about your product or your innovation. And we like to tell the whole world about what we're doing at Grow Everything so you could be a part of that. I mean, the way that we talk about Grow Everything to the public is through, of course, social media. LinkedIn's a big one. Again, we have such a huge network on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on X sometimes, depending on who's behaving.
Yeah, and we're also starting a Substack. So,
yes.
Look out for that.
Yeah, getting out there. And we love to have you. We love partnerships. We love collaboration. And again, this whole thing is to spark conversations about the future of biology. So come on board, join the ride. We have a good time here at Grow Everything.
All right. I think that's the episode.
Yes, absolutely. Stay tuned, like and subscribe. You have to say that and reach out to us. We give you plenty of fodder to reach out to us, talk to us about reports, or even just let us know what's on your mind that we need to pay attention to. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. Bye.